It's exactly what you're talking about, where you're like, I revile these guys, but I'm going to make an entire podcast and career on telling their stories, but I'm doing it in an ethical way. It's like, well, it's exactly what you talked about. It's like,
oh my God,
real justice would be like them disappear, right?
Oh my God.
You're part of the problem.
I'm a fucking hypocrite.
Yeah.
I'm a lying pig.
I just admit there's something alluring and cool about it, which is why they continue.
You got me so good.
I know.
Alana, we were just talking about journalism, the fourth estate.
Wow.
There's
sort of my favorite topic.
You got three estates, then there's a fourth.
There is.
And
ideally, there's a fourth.
There isn't always a fourth.
We don't want to take the fourth for granted here.
Not to take the wind out of our sails on this, but obviously we're both award-winning journalists.
Speak for yourself. I do not want an award.
I am an award-winning journalist then, in that case.
Actually, I think maybe I have, but they're like...
Look, the point is, you are a journalist. I used to be a journalist, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Asterisks, right?
You're retired now?
I think I've been retired. I wasn't retired like in Blade Runner.
What do you call this podcast?
I call this podcast the ultimate hangout pod. You know, it's just Amy, not going to say last names, or Will, or, you know, you're on a...
Just talking to your celeb friend.
Yeah, launching a wireless network. All right, I shouldn't probably get into that. But look, journalism, I was astounded we came in and you were doing journalism work unrelated to this podcast, which I have to talk with you about.
Yeah.
That's not okay. No. And, you know, we're doing this Al Capone series, and I'm thinking about how much of it centers around the Al Capone story, centers around the media coverage of him, right? Like really the reason we're talking about him still today is in no small proportion due to the media coverage he got.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've done so many episodes on this guy. He's one of your faves. I thought, you know, we're nearing the end of this arc. And I thought I would leave like convinced he actually was the best mobster, but I'm not sure I am.
Yeah.
I still think if he was the best at PR, he was the best at image making.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things converged at the same time to make him as influential as he is. Was it just all his smarts? That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But he was very good at this one thing, and that is working the media.
And this is really what we're going to be talking about in today's episode, right? The fact that you're right. I mean, he was an able mob administrator. He was good at organizing. He was good at selecting the right guy for the right job and all that. If anything, he sort of wasn't ruthless enough. He sort of wasn't covert enough. He didn't have some of the skills that later mob bosses had, or even other mob bosses in other cities at that time were exhibiting. But he did have this one, and it really is a gift for charming.
The gift of gab.
He had the gift of gab. He could charm the public using the press, right? And that's really interesting in no small part because, spoiler alert, I see some parallels with present day stuff where there's this gravitational pull of this one guy on everything, right? And again, I'm talking about the Smartless podcast, okay? No, there's this gravitational pull of this one vile gangster at the center of everything, right? And he just calls the tune, you know? And every so often you have a story where something happens that isn't supposed to happen and it breaks through the noise. Jeffrey Epstein. And, you know, and that is a type of story we're going to talk about today.
Right. But then you create new stories.
That's right.
That distract from that story, you know, sort of like invading an American city. And then suddenly we're talking about that.
Alana, you're reading my mail. Okay? Because this is the story today of when a journalist is murdered in Al Capone's Chicago, how it briefly ruptures what everyone agrees are the ground rules for how this whole sham operates. And then after some sunlight pokes through, you got to slam it all shut again. Cover it all up, put dirt on it, and pretend it isn't there. And that is the story of Jake Lingle, martyred Chicago journalist, and Al Capone, subject of today's episode. So, something I dream about at night.
I can only imagine.
Great start to this act, right? Is getting in a time machine and going back in time to be a reporter.
Yeah.
With the press thing in my hat, and remember
You really were meant for that era.
I wish I'd been a reporter. Hey, shouting out at.
What would you do with all the time you spend on Twitter and Blue Sky?
I guess I would do it. I guess I would write it on little pieces of paper.
Yeah.
And throw it at people,
They'd love that.
That's what they did back then. That was microblogging, right?
Yeah. They're just at the bar screaming at people.
Well, I would have done that. I also would have done that anyway.
You would have done that too,
yeah. So this is my dream. I don't think it's going to happen, right? For when I'm too old now, because everyone back then, they look like they were 50 and they are 22.
Yeah, the skincare routines were not.
Very different time, including, this is exactly the kind of guy I would have liked to have been Jake Lingle, the subject of today's episode, who we see here. In a casual photo in the newsroom of the Chicago Tribune, his employer, just a brief description of this guy.
Well, I mean, he does look like a corpse that's been animated.
Right.
I mean, just pale, sort of lifeless, but cool.
He's cool,
Smoking
right?
a cigar.
Yep.
The tie's kind of messed up. He's
got the sloppy look.
Totally.
But he's cool, obviously. This is a street smart guy, right? Which makes sense. He's a crime reporter for the Chicago Tribune. He goes to the scene of whatever outrage has occurred, phones in all the details. He's connected. He knows everyone, right? And on June 9th, 1930, he stops into the newsroom, has his lunch, is telling people that he feels like he's being followed, which, listen, how often...
You're a crime reporter.
Yeah, this happens. How often have I said to you I'm being followed?
Every day.
Every day. It's becoming a real problem.
It really is. I'm worried.
Yeah. So Jake Lingle is this well-sourced crime reporter, thinks he's being followed. He's walking out half day in that he's going to go to the track. Again, another thing that just...
Yeah, let's talk about this. You're a crime reporter. You're maybe half reporting on the crime and then gambling. Like, what's the deal?
Listen, it's called self-care. You got to take some time to recharge your batteries in the afternoon by going and gambling. And that's what he's going to do. So he's walking on...
maybe he's developing sources too, You can always justify it that way.
I am not exaggerating when I say the Chicago Tribune is going to claim later that's exactly what he was doing that afternoon. He's taken some time off, though. We know the truth. He's going to the train station down in the Loop, I believe where the metro station now is, towards the Art Institute. He's walking over there, stops at a newsstand to pick up a racing form, see who the ponies are that are running today. And a guy shouts out to him from a car with a few others, play this horse or play that horse. And he thank you, because he said, no, this is the kind of personality he is. He walks down.
He's a gumshoe.
People know him. He's Jake, right?
How old is he at this time?
He's 38.
Oh, okay.
He's walking through a pedestrian tunnel towards the train station, I think on Randolph, and under Michigan Avenue. And two men are tracking him through this tunnel. One of them, described as a blonde man wearing gray silk gloves, walks up behind him, raises the gun, and what we see next, one bullet fired into the back of Jake Lingle's head, felling him. His corpse here in a photo taken by the Tribune, still clutching the racing form with his straw summer boater hat on the ground. And as we can see, throngs and throngs of people witnessing it, right? They see the gunman flee. A policeman even gives chase, but he gets away. This is a a lot of things have happened, obviously, in Prohibition Chicago. We are now about a year out from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and 7 men being slaughtered, right? We have seen murder after murder. I mean, there are about a dozen or so gang murders in the past week, is the thinking.
Now, does a journalist being murdered at this point in time have a really shocking and upsetting effect?
Yeah, this is a thing that is shocking because this has not really happened before. It has happened in other cities, right? There was a murder in Ohio a couple of years earlier of Don Mellett, who was an editor of a Canton, Ohio newspaper who was assassinated for covering the mob. So this is a risk, right? And he won the Pulitzer Prize.
My first question is, what stories had he recently done or was he doing?
And this is what explodes immediately, that as they say in the Tribune, right? Determination that the murder of Alfred Lingle will be made the fulcrum upon which gang rule of Chicago will be broken was expressed yesterday by city, county, state, federal officials. The publisher of the Chicago Tribune, Robert McCormick, a very strange guy in a lot of ways, but he takes this as such a personal affront. There's a reward that eventually totals $55,000 for information.
Wow.
Now, just to give you some, at that time, that's over $1 million. Okay, that's how much money is put into this, right?
And the newspaper had that much money to even give.
I mean, well, and this brings us to Robert McCormick, the publisher, who, if you've ever seen the Tribune Tower in Chicago, you already know he's a weird guy because it looks like Dracula's mansion. Okay,
sick.
And he is dwelling up there among the bats in the belfry, right? He's he's called the Colonel almost exclusively.
Is he evil or good?
He's sort of evil, but sort of interesting. Like, he's a arch Republican conservative, right? But he hates Big Bill Thompson. He hates Prohibition.
Can't put him in a box.
I mean, you know, a coffin that basically that he fucking sleeps in, because he's like, you know, he's like a polo player. He's like this, you know, he's this heir to the McCormick fortune and the Medal fortune, but he's a very interesting guy, and he really goes to town on this. He takes it as a personal affront, what has happened, right? And Jake Lingle being murdered, like, it doesn't just enrage him, obviously, as publisher of the newspaper, and he vows to get revenge, right? He calls it the challenge, you know? And he says in his paper, in an unsigned editorial, the meaning of this murder is plain. It was committed in reprisal and an attempt at intimidation. Mr. Lingle was a police reporter and an exceptionally well-informed one, right? What made him valuable to his newspaper marked him as dangerous to the killers. You know?
Wow.
So this is a martyr for journalism, right? And everyone is saying this, including a guy who's his close friend, the police commissioner, William Russell. William Russell was appointed in no small part thanks to Jake Lingle's recommendation, right?
Whoa.
To Mayor Big Bill Thompson, who we talked about.
It's a little bit of a conflict of interest, but...
Keep that in mind, okay?
You're not really supposed to be doing that as a journalist, I don't think.
So this is, you know, the way influences, like, it shows how influential he is, right?
And how influential journalists were at that time.
That's right. And Jake Lingle, like, he's not just connected with the police, right? And Russell, he's connected with the politicians, right? Mayor Thompson wants to get the Tribune off his back, so he appoints a police commissioner who is tight with the Tribune. Seems to make sense, right? On the other hand, right, he's also very tight with the underworld, right? And as the Chicago Tribune says in the first, you know, coverage of him, right, they make clear that it was always probable that he would arouse the anger of one or more of these criminals who were so constantly in fear of being stooled upon, right? Now, I think that means something else, but I think ratted, right? Jake was personally acquainted with Al Capone, notorious gang leader. He obtained an exclusive interview with Capone while the latter was in prison. Several times he has interviewed Capone at the gang chief's winter estate in Miami Beach, Florida. Blah, 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 right? But so he can speak to everyone, and someone, maybe Al Capone, is behind this.
Maybe.
Right? You know?
I mean, who else would it be?
Another interesting question to keep in mind, right? You're teeing them up so
I'm
perfectly.
sorry. Is it perfect? Too much?
Perfect.
Okay.
But all this is to say, while everyone is getting their unders in a bunch over this, right? They have a massive funeral, 21 gun salute. He is a Navy veteran. And the coverage is pouring in from around the world, actually, right? And it all kind of speaks to the fact that the coverage of these gang wars was of international interest at this time, right? I mean, Chicago was not actually more significantly violent than other American cities in this time, but something about it is just the best. It just is. Come on. You know, it's so cinematic and all that. And no small part of that is because of how the reporters covered it, right? They love the sensationalism of it.
Right. So when we say, he's covering them, it's like, this isn't just necessarily straight investigative, like revealing crimes. I mean, some of this coverage is flattering, no?
Oh, yeah. Well,
So that's what's interesting. Like, do they not like Jake Lingle or do they like him?
Well, this is the thing.
As the mob.
Right. So this is the thing that we're going to get into, right? That the press and the mob, there's a symbiotic relationship here, right? Where there's obviously a barely constrained love of the mob by the journalists, where they find them colorful, they find them good copy, interesting to write about, right?
It sells papers.
It sells papers, most of all. That there is, if it bleeds, it leads, that, thinking. And look, and there are honest people, obviously, who are in the newspaper game. I want to mention in particular Tony Berardi, who was a photojournalist, kind of a pioneering photojournalist. Italian American, as the name indicates. And he has the best photographs of Capone, period. Even though he privately said he found Capone disgusting because, he was a pox on Italian Americans, right? And still the best, probably every good photo you see of Al Capone is him, right?
Wow.
Him at the Cubs game, him doing this, him doing that, and the best photos of his scar, which he always tried to hide, right? But the less nice side of that is everyone crowding into the SMC Cartage garage to take photos of the 7 dead St. Valentine's Day Massacre victims. Like, everyone's got to get the photo of John May with his head blown apart.
Also, access journalism. I mean, there's an element of ass kissing that goes into being able to get those photos, I'm sure.
And so everyone's saying, Al Lingle, the chief of detectives, Al Lingle, I've known him for 8 or 10 years, honest and courageous, with a greater knowledge of the underworld than any man known to me, And it's like, all right, maybe, like there's one anecdote Chicago Magazine has of he'd go into a cellar and he'd know the name of everyone there and all that, right? But, does this make a martyr? Well, we'll find out, right? But for now, the issue that is going on is that this is coming at a very bad time for Al Capone.
Yeah.
Right? Let's give some context about what Al Capone has been dealing with at this time. Right? He has been increasingly out of Chicago, right?
Yeah, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which we talked about last week, it's not looking good. I mean, he's got to lay low.
Yes. And interestingly, again, you mentioned sourcing, right? You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Chicago Tribune, for instance, does not connect Capone with the St. Valentine's Day Massacre for a while, which is odd because now we know, obviously, he was the culprit, right?
Well, didn't we always kind of know?
Well, I mean, one would think,
so why?
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why did they wait so long?
Why did the police sources not point to Al Capone initially?
I think we know. At this point in the pod season, I think everyone's got an idea as to why.
It's interesting, obviously the heat is so much that Al Capone, basically on the orders of East Coast mafia figures, goes to jail for a little bit in Philadelphia on this weird gun charge where he engineers it himself, right? So he's away from Chicago for like a year, comes back. Even getting into Chicago is hard now because they'll arrest him on just to harass him, right? On vagrancy charges and whatever. So he'll go into Rockford, Illinois and try to sneak into the city. There are periods of time where if he leaves his house, he'll be arrested. So he's like a virtual prisoner in some of these hotels and
Again,
homes.
is this worth it? That's could be the title of every episode.
I mean, this is it, right? Like, more money, more problems.
Mhm.
The Al Capone story, right? We also have Mayor Big Bill Thompson, his puppet in the office,
Right.
is increasingly asleep at the switch, increasingly senile. Does this remind you
Of
of
any-
anyone? He's going on vacation all the time to Wisconsin, not Florida. And if that wasn't bad enough, right, with all this heat, there is a burgeoning weird consensus in the business community in Chicago.
Weird.
I'm going to say weird, and I'll tell you why. That they need to become vigilantes to take out Al Capone. And they have all sorts of fun little clubhouse, like Little Rascals type organizations.
Okay.
Like they have a group called The Secret Six, which, how cool.
Do these groups actually do anything?
Yeah, they hire cops to
Okay.
to try to find shit for them.
Oh.
And investigate.
Well, I love this. It's like we're going to take down the mobsters by kind of doing what they do.
Yeah. And the other thing that they're not saying is it's all these titans of industry and business and stuff. The reason they're doing it is Al Capone's bad for business.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not.
He's run
this other
shit. We don't want to kick anything up anymore.
Right. I found a great op-ed in the Daily Worker, the socialist newspaper in Chicago at that time, which says how, all these guys who hate Capone, like, they are Capone.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the same guy. And the Chicago Tribune, which is so outraged over Jake Lingle, right? How many secret deals have they benefited from for real estate, for whatever, you name it, the same way he does, right? So all this is to say Al Capone is besieged. He might increasingly be losing influence within the outfit itself, which is interesting, right? We'll come back to that a little later. The last thing he needs on his plate is that he killed a crusading crime journalist.
Yeah, it's not good.
This is the bad time.
Honestly, who else could it be? Someone who hates Al Capone and knows he's going to get hit.
Oh, Alana, you should have been in the Secret Six.
I know, I would have done. I do think I would be good. We've talked about this.
I think you'd be excellent at it.
Be good at crime.
Yeah. Oh, I thought journalism, but okay.
That too.
That too.
I'm already good at that.
So Al Capone's boxed in a corner, but I would say never count him out. Let's see how he counterpunches his way.
Oh, this is exciting. So I'm sure at this point, there's other newspapers that are in the mix. It's not just the Chicago Tribune. So I'm curious, what the other dailies are up to, especially around this topic.
This is a great point, right? Chicago Tribune obviously is editorially still a conservative paper, right? A product of McCormick's influence, right? But there are others that are obviously more populist, more, more left-wing, more liberal, more aligned with Democrats and Republicans, et cetera. All this influence peddling going on. One of them is the Chicago Daily News, now no longer in existence. And there's a fascinating story that is told in an essay in a memoir, later memoir, written a year after Al Capone had died. So bear this in mind, by a guy named Howard Vincent O'Brien. And this is an editor who describes working his way into the inner sanctum of Al Capone. First through his money man, Jack Guzik, wining and dining him, and then finally being invited into the inner sanctum, the Lexington Hotel, for a meal with Al Capone. And something very interesting happens at this meeting. He says...
I'm scared.
Yes, I would be too. The first thing is that he says how he is, quote, lithe and graceful, right? Mephistophelian. I hope I got that right. Like
no,
Mephistopheles, the devil. Mephistophelian and droll.
Okay, he's just showing off.
This is a literary editor, I should add. This is not Jake Lingle, okay? Jake Lingle could barely write.
This is the difference between an editor and a reporter. The editor's trying to show off, and it's annoying. I say that as an editor.
Absolutely, But he has a nice handshake with him. They sit down. This unbelievable feast is spread out before them. Like something in Arabian Nights, he quotes. Again,
God.
this fucking guy, huh?
Yeah, he's really taking the bait.
Right. So Al Capone has set out this whole meal for him, and O'Brien admits, it petrified me. I should not have been in the least surprised to rend the wretched waiter into pieces. Because he starts yelling at the waiter, and then returns to him as if
that's a great intimidation tactic.
Right. So this is all. There's a great Max Allan Collins book about this, about Capone that goes into detail on this, right? And the point of this whole dinner is Al Capone's leading towards saying, I got offered $2 million to write my memoir, but I need a guy I can kind of trust to ghostwrite it for me.
Al Capone's writing a memoir now. The mob's not going to like that.
How about, better than that, I don't do any work, and you, Howard Vincent O'Brien, write it for me.
Okay.
And you sign these documents, and we can get going here. And he says, okay,
Look.
All right.
It's like, I'm probably not making anything at the Daily News.
Yeah. So he calls it, quote, the most significant contribution to current history that could possibly be written.
Who calls it that?
The writer.
Oh my God. See, again.
And they set to writing Al Capone's memoir. Now.
What I wouldn't give to be in those sessions.
To be a fly
your dream.
On
that
is
wall. Your dream, to be this guy.
Well, it isn't entirely, because here's the thing. The guy is right. O'Brien is right in saying this would be a fucking amazing book if he is straight with me.
Well, right, but he's not going to be. They never are.
Exactly. And what he starts getting fed up with and starting to get scared about is all Al Capone wants to talk about is, my wife and kids are suffering. My Sonny is suffering, right? My mother is suffering. And then he asks him, who did the St. Valentine's Day Massacre? And he's like, I can't talk about that.
He just wants to paint himself as a victim, I'm sure.
Right. And this is what we're getting at now, which is this guy. It is so astonishing to me that the head of the Chicago mob wanted to write his own book to give his side of the story because he didn't like the 5 to 7 books that had come out.
Why is that astonishing to you?
Because mobsters in the years since then, and they've learned in no small part from this lesson, shut up.
Yes.
Don't say anything.
Yeah, but he's not saying anything. That's the thing. I'm like, sure, it would be surprising to me if he was going to actually have a memoir, but just some PR thing that makes him look good. That makes sense.
And this is getting at, listen, this is getting at what I really want to talk about, which is the PR genius of Al Capone in a very modern American celebrity sense.
Yeah,
right?
This is a really contemporary strategy.
Very much so. And normally, and we've already talked about the downsides of this as a criminal boss. Obviously, you put a big target on your back, you do all this. Something I've been thinking about more lately is we don't talk about the benefits it bestows too.
Well, there's already a target on his back. He can't even leave the house. So
why not?
What is this? Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Why not shape public opinion as much as he can? There's benefit to that too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not to name names. If you're ubiquitous all the time and you're scandalized all the time, every day is a fresh scandal, and you're good for copy, you're good for material.
Why wouldn't you benefit?
Maybe you're not going to go away,
Yeah.
Ever,
That too.
Right? So he's always been very skillful at providing copy, right? Providing good lines to the press, right? Even the O'Brien thing, he gives him a bunch of good lines, he wants to be free of the rackets and and it turns out he's been doing it for years with Jake Lingle too, right? So again,
wow,
we already knew that Al Capone and Jake Lingle are friends, right? But
what do you mean friends?
Well, I'll give an example. Al Capone returning from being kicked out of Los Angeles, his train enters Southern Illinois. Jake Lingle is ushered onto the train to give us some really great insights like that. For instance, Al Capone is a, quote, citizen with an unblemished record, hounded from his home by the very policemen whose salaries are paid, at least in part, from the victim's pocket.
Okay, I'm glad I asked this because I was under the impression Jake Lingle was a little bit more legit.
What, is something not legit about that? That's interesting.
Unblemished?
Well, would a blemished man be on the cover of Time magazine in March of 1930 as he was?
Apparently.
Apparently. I mean, I guess Hitler was too, but we'll get to him later. Another headline, Capone's son finds sins of father heavy. Mother pleads for lad, victim of schoolmates' torment. He was homeschooled. There are no schoolmates tormenting him. Okay. But these are the sorts of things he is able to smuggle in to the press, right? And again, this is because he is so skillful at the press, and he's so skillful at swaying public opinion that when the Great Depression breaks out, possibly his masterstroke is opening the Al Capone soup kitchen.
Is it literally called the Al Capone soup kitchen?
No, I'm calling it that.
Okay.
There's no sign on it saying that, but everyone...
That's almost better because everyone knows.
It's like the Larry David thing about...
I was going to say the Holocaust memorial, right?
The anonymous wing of the museum or whatever, right?
Exactly. And
then saying I did it, right?
It's perfect.
Right? So and in fairness to Capone, right? He always was very generous with money, right? To other people, and including to journalists. There's one sports reporter in one of the books who talks about he's in this meeting with Al Capone. He realizes it's for talking about fixing all the boxing matches, and he's given the best cigar of his life he's ever had. And Capone notices the kid likes the cigar, and he gives him a box of them. It's like a month's salary that costs a cigar. So this is the sort of charming life he leads.
I mean, I don't think he's doing it because he's really a good guy, but sure.
No, because
we're talking about that story with the kid now.
Yes, exactly.
Almost 100 years later. It works.
I think that there's a mix of he's very canny, he's very clever. He genuinely likes doing this, right? Is part of it too. And the wider world is taking notice. There is something else happening now. Now, I mentioned the Great Depression has happened, right? The other funny thing that's happening is there's this dark side of the press that Lingle's death is now revealing.
Yeah.
Right? As you correctly sussed out, talking about why is Lingle kissing his ass, right? There's an amazing Yale study that talks about the influence network of Al Capone, looking at him as someone in a community, right? And you see there's 5,000 foot soldiers telling of his good deeds, basically, around him.
Wow.
Like these community networks, There's a plain talk that is refreshing. He openly talks about bootlegging. He openly talks about selling alcohol and dishing on, I didn't do this, I wouldn't do that, et cetera, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah, but they always admit to one thing, so you think that they're telling the truth about everything.
Well,
it's the least egregious crime.
It feels like he's being open and refreshing, right? And this is such a canny use of the press.
That is really good.
Right?
Yeah.
And also, Prohibition, it has to be said, is so unpopular, right? That he seems refreshing. He seems like a guy who's telling it like it is.
Yeah, for the people.
Right? And the press is complicit in this. This amazing photo was taken in Cuba.
Okay.
A frequent vacation spot for gangsters, right? And non-gangsters alike. Jake Lingle would vacation there frequently, including on his honeymoon. We'll come back to that later. Here we have Al Capone sitting in the back. In the front, Harry Reid, a editor at multiple Chicago newspapers, who is taken on vacation by Al Capone, is hosted in his home in Miami Beach by Al Capone, right? Harry Reid loses his job over this photo.
Yeah, because let's just clarify. So this photo, all the gangsters are in white suits. Harry Reid, he has a black jacket, but then he has the same hat as them on his knee. And you can tell he's loving this. He's in the mix. Yeah. He's not there as a journalist.
Because the history of the press in Chicago and gangsters goes back a long ways. What were called the circulation wars, right? Over newspapers. This is how these guys got their start as thugs for one newspaper or another.
That's so true.
Right?
I remember that.
We talked about this, right?
Yeah.
One of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day massacre was a circulation manager at one of the newspapers, right?
So how prolific is this? Is this just a Chicago thing? I'm assuming not.
It is taking on national importance. The Annenberg family, who we've talked about before, the Annenberg Foundation, big media, ethics people, they started out as fucking gangsters in the circulation departments, running racing wires, doing gambling results for sports, betting, et cetera, et cetera. And they started out out of this war, right? And so, as we can see with Harry
This is just what the press needs, okay?
Oh, yeah, right? Like, I mean...
We've actually always been corrupt.
We've always had an issue with, it's like, what, Nietzsche? You look into the abyss gazes back. You develop an underworld source, right? The underworld source develops you as a source, You may not see it.
I love that. That's very deep, Dan.
I'm a very deep guy, And less deep, although very popular, is the image that is now jumping from the printed word onto the hot new form of media, and that is the talking picture. The movies, which we have the birth of the gangster movie. Now, I could obviously...
It's no surprise this is all happening, too, around the same time, right?
So talking movies, movies with sound really developed in the late 1920s. And at first, I think it's not going to work. And then they get the first Tommy gun sound effect, and it just takes off like nobody's business, right? Gangsters make the jump to movies. Probably what we would call the first real gangster movie is in 1927. It's called Underworld. And it's written by Ben Hecht, who is maybe like the founding Hollywood screenwriter in the sense that we know screenwriting today, who happens to be a former Chicago crime reporter. So Underworld basically retells a lot of the Dean O'Banion story. It tells some of the Capone story. It depicts the first ward ball that we've talked about before, Hinky Dink Kenna and all that. And then 5 years later, he kind of retreads a lot of that more explicitly about Al Capone with the first version of Scarface.
So they found a new medium for this sort of propaganda type stuff.
And, okay, it is coming at a sensitive time, right? You have 1932, you have Scarface, right? Where he looks up at the advertising, the flashing neon advertising lights that say, "The world is yours," And this is speaking to people during the Great Depression. Like, if you want to get something in this world, you have to grab it with both hands, which is what Al Capone is saying.
Who better to do that than a
right?
mobster?
And the movie ends with this unbelievable shootout where, it's absolutely insane. There's the Public Enemy with Jimmy Cagney. He smashes a grapefruit into his girlfriend's face, because she angers him at breakfast, right? I mean, these movies are fucking out of control. And people, conservatives in particular, are worried these are going to incite people into crime, into revolution.
Yeah, because people are loving it, right?
And it's the Great Depression, People are out of work, right? And they feel like it's lionizing these gangsters, chief among them, Al Capone, right? So...
And he's loving this because he's still alive at this time.
He's not only loving it, there's allegedly like he's angry at first about Scarface. And then I've read...
because he doesn't like his scar.
Right. Then I've read he acquired a copy of it, which is not common at that time to acquire film
so he
copy.
Can watch it every night.
Right. So, come on. Come on. You're in the movies now.
Yeah.
He's offered film parts.
Of course.
Turn them down.
That's a little too far.
Yeah. He's not going to do that. He's not going to be like John Hamm, where he's going to agree to... I need to show people I'm funny, All this is to say, I don't think it's so simple that he just oversteps and that's it, right? Like, the PR served no function. If you can shape the way everyone views you into something positive, that's kind of a big deal, right?
Kinda.
But it is possible to fly too close to the sun.
There's a line. It's a balance.
And he's not good at proportion. And the Jake Lingle thing, as we're seeing, is just, it's shining too much of a light on too much of what's going on beneath the surface. Like that Daily Worker op-ed said, there's a whole system going on underneath, of which Al Capone is just one powerful part.
Right.
Right?
But the Jake Lingle thing kind of threatens to expose it all.
And within a month of his murder, it's going to expose it in ways that no one thought possible. And that's what we're going to talk about next. We have a running theme on this show of talking about men who are the most vile, disgusting toads in the known universe.
Mm-hmm. It's a hobby of mine. And
I'm also surprised you often are like, you F with them, you know?
Excuse me?
You're into
You F with them.
I F with them in a different way.
No.
You don't think so?
No, I don't.
How so?
It's exactly what you're talking about, where you're like, I revile these guys, but I'm going to make an entire podcast and career on telling their stories, but I'm doing it in an ethical way. It's like, well, it's exactly what you talked about. It's like,
oh my God,
real justice would be like them disappear, right?
Oh my God.
You're part of the problem.
I'm a fucking hypocrite.
Yeah.
I'm a lying pig.
I just admit there's something alluring and cool about it, which is why they continue.
You got me so good.
I know.
I deserved my blue sky suspension.
You do.
I'm just a hypocrite.
No. It's not that I F with them. I think I'm just, look, if there wasn't something compelling about them, they wouldn't have captured the imagination, not just the American imagination, but the imagination of the world for so long.
God, the pupil has become the master. What can I even say to that? You've nailed it. But let's put it to the test anyway.
Okay.
With this guy, Jack Zuda. This guy is as gross as they come. Former pimp, brothel keeper, nasty, ugly, scummy guy.
And not a part of Al Capone's mob.
Crucially, not. He is a North Side mob figure of George Bugs Moran, the victims of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. They are obviously down some guys after 7 of them got murdered, right? So Jack Zuda is more prominent ever since then. And it is soon determined, the actual mastermind of the Jake Lingle killing. Probably, we think.
Allegedly.
It is true that he never had his day in court because after being dragged into the police station for questioning, he literally begged the cops, don't make me go out there. And they're like, what? You want to stay in jail? And he's like, yeah, I do.
Something bad's going to happen to me when I walk out.
And literally it is because he says to the cop, can you give me a ride somewhere? Like to a train station or something. I'm getting out of town, you know? And I'm not exaggerating. The cop gives him a ride to a train station. As soon as the cop lets him out.
Why is the cop like aiding him in flinging?
He doesn't want him to get killed on the steps of the police station.
Okay.
Which they are literally worried will happen if they do this. Why? Because the suspicion has now fallen on Jack Zuda that he is behind the Jake Lingle killing and that he did it to cast blame on Al Capone and have Al Capone take the fall for it. So Jack Zuda, as soon as he's let out of that police car, the hitmen who are trailing him open fire, kill a poor guy operating a streetcar. Zuda gets out of there, flees to rural Wisconsin, Delafield, Wisconsin, in a resort. He's hiding under an assumed name. And August 1st of that year, he's feeding nickels into a electric piano, which is so awesome.
So cute.
You know.
Cinematic.
Very cinematic. When some Capone hitmen walk in and blow him the fuck away. Probably led by Sam Golfbag Hunt.
Golf bag? Incredible.
Great place to store a Tommy gun.
Or a body.
I mean,
maybe a little small.
Maybe a very little body. Yeah. If they're going after the Munchkins from Wizard of Oz, I guess he could do that.
But they chop them up. You know what? We don't need to get into this.
We don't have to get into it, right? So here we have the spider at the center of the web, Jack Zuda, the actual mastermind of the Jake Lingle killing.
A member of the North Side Mob.
Member of the North Side Mob. The hit was designed to not only eliminate Jake Lingle for reasons we're going to get into, but cast blame on Al Capone. And this is because a twofer. Jake Lingle is a journalist and a gangster.
I'm not surprised.
Newsflash. Okay. Breaking news on this. The investigation of Jake Lingle is so funny, it falls apart so quickly.
Well, I mean, he is spending half the day gambling.
This was our first clue.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Tribune coverage of this gets absolutely hilarious. Now, I've read the original, the newspaper article that was written the day he was murdered. And I swear to you, there is thing after thing in it where I feel like everyone at the paper knows he's dirty and is trying to cover it up, right?
Yeah.
Like saying, yeah, he spent an awful lot of money, but it was because he had a huge inheritance from his dad. No, he didn't. Yeah, he would laugh off rumors he had a diamond belt buckle from Al Capone. He did. He actually did.
He went to the racetrack to care for the horses.
Right.
Know?
Yeah, that sort of thing. And develop sources. No, he was a gambling addict.
Right.
He was close friends with Police Commissioner Russell because he was a beat cop and they grew up together and he was like a son to him. No, Jake Lingle was the bag man for the Chicago Police Commissioner. They had a brokerage account together in the stock market where tens of thousands of dollars passed through it, right? Millions and millions of dollars passed through his bank account. So they take one look at his financial records and they realize what's going on, which is that, quote, Jake Lingle is the unofficial police commissioner of Chicago. He's using his job,
oh my God,
as a Tribune reporter to shake down every gangster in the city and say, I can fix this for you, I can fix that for you, because I'm your in to the police commissioner.
Wow.
Now, the Washington Post just laid off a third of their journalists, right? I would not blame anyone for wanting a sideline, you know.
A side hustle.
I get it. But this goes a little far. I suspect Lingle was dirty from the beginning. Mario Gomez, the great historian, found when Jake Lingle went to Cuba for his honeymoon with his wife, the next two people on the list were John Torrio and his wife.
Stop.
So he honeymooned with John Torrio.
How pissed are you as the wife? It's like you're on your honeymoon and he's working. He's secretly working.
Yeah. I guess it could be worse than John Torrio and his wife, you know?
Yeah.
Jack Zuda, you know?
True.
Gross.
I was actually going to say, when we were talking about mobsters that I think I perhaps am more impressed with, John Torrio.
Well, he's a genius, right?
Yeah, but no one knows who he is, you know?
And he is exercising influence in the background still at this time, right? He obviously nurtured Lingle as a useful guy, right? So all these honeyed words that started, the martyr, the guy who has been killed for truth in Chicago and all that, it's starting to recede into the background now, right? Like, he owned 4 houses. He lived out of a suite.
He's a journalist.
Like, what the fuck is going on here? They print the full list of Lingle's checks and deposits. This is how long it is. It's like tens of thousands of dollars. He's loaning $500 to the most corrupt police captain in the department. You know, he's calling in debts from gangsters. He's doing this. He's doing that. He's hanging out with Al Capone. Suddenly, him hanging out with Al Capone takes on a sinister aspect.
The head of the Tribune cannot be happy with this.
Oh my God, they get so whiny. Okay, I got to read to you. When Alfred Lingle, and no one calls him Alfred, except these, you know, right? When Alfred Lingle was murdered, the motive seemed to be apparent. He was close to information dangerous to gangsters.
Because he was one.
Yeah, right. It had been expected that in due time, the reprisals, which had killed gangster after gangster in the city, would be attempted against any other persons seeking to interfere with them, right? All that's to say, Alfred Lingle now takes a different character, one in which he was unknown to the management of the Tribune when he was alive. He is dead and cannot defend himself, but many facts now revealed must be accepted as eloquent against him. He was not and could not have been a great reporter. He was a gangster. You know, like, you fucking knew. Okay.
Of course.
Give me a fucking break. Because here's the thing. He's the emissary to the underworld. He's the emissary to the cops, and you knew it. You knew it the whole time, right? And maybe McCormick in his fucking castle didn't know it, but all these guys in the newsroom did.
Yeah,
right?
but he was getting the scoops, so.
There's that's it, right? Like, he got the results. There's an amazing series of reports that come out from St. Louis. Another embarrassment, not a Chicago paper getting this, right? Saying how, okay, you want to throw open like McCormick proposes a grand jury to go after these journalists who are accusing him of hiring a gangster. And he says, he throws it back in his face, this one journalist from St. Louis, Brundridge. He says, what can a grand jury do? We suggest you investigate another reporter paid 5 cents a bag for every sack of cement sold in Chicago, right? Look at the visits of other newspaper men to the island retreats of Al Scarface Capone, right? Check the income of an editor who said he's, quote, the guy who fixed a standardized price schedule for divorce lawyers, the bond signing racket, the legal fee racket, the lottery racket of a newspaper man who recently went south with some $50,000 of sucker money.
They love being like, well, everyone does it.
That's right. Everyone does it, right? So it's corrupt to the fucking core, right? And Jack Zuda knew that. Why did Jack Zuda actually do this, right? We don't know for certain. There's a couple possibilities. One is that Jake Lingle agreed to fix a dog track for him, didn't do it, took the money and scammed him. Another, to reopen a nightclub on Waveland that was run by the North Side Mob. We don't know for certain. What probably happened is he lost all his money in the Great Depression market crash and got greedy.
Right.
And just went too far. So Zuda comes up with this plan. He's going to use a gun that was bought by a North Side soldier who has since defected to the Capone mob.
Perfect.
Right? So the finger will point towards him. They use a hitman, Patsy Tardy, who's later eliminated himself. Can't talk. They do all this to point towards the Capone mob. It doesn't work because the Capone mob just says, you did it, actually. And we're going to kill you. Fuck you, which they do. But in the meantime, Chief Russell has to resign.
Wow.
The chief of detectives has to resign. And it's a big fucking mess. So when a big fucking mess happens where everyone looks bad, you said it at the beginning, what do? You put a nice layer of earth over the whole damn thing.
You go to Florida for a little bit.
Go to Florida. We're going to cover it up now.
Yep.
And we're going to cover it up by throwing up this Patsy, Leo Brothers, this loser from St. Louis who didn't do it, probably had a gambling debt, and was told, you take a minimum sentence for murdering this guy and we'll not kill you, So Leo Brothers gets convicted of the murder of Jake Lingle, which he almost certainly didn't do. Says, I can do the 14 years standing on my head.
Wow.
Never talks, No one is actually really convicted of it, right?
He serves 14 years to get out of paying a debt.
Well, the debt would mean, we're going to kill you if you don't do it.
Okay.
Right? So everyone's happy at the end of the day. We can slam the door back shut. We don't have to look into any of this shit. And all this is happening. But one really funny thing is that Capone is still drawing a target on his back. He gives an interview to that guy, Brundridge from St. Louis. And he says, listen, Harry, I like your face. Let me give you a hot tip. Lay off Chicago and the money-hungry reporters. You're right. And because you're right, you're wrong. You can't buck it, not even with the backing of your newspaper, because it's too big a proposition. No one man will ever realize how big it is, so lay off it. And he's right. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? But even Capone isn't big enough for that. You know what I mean? And there's this whole system emerging that is operating without Capone. The same one that covered this up, the same one that might extend to his own organization beneath him, who are ready for Al Capone to shuffle off this mortal coil.
Yeah, he's been involved in too many scandals.
Right.
It's time for a new face.
So this is what we're going to talk about next week, as the consensus is starting to emerge that it's time for Al Capone to go, that he has outworn his welcome.
Yeah.
Right. But I wish I could say we are feeling the same way in America currently about our own version of Al Capone, right? That we are maybe ready for him to go away.
Well, give it a little more time. I mean, we've always been ready.
I've been ready for a while, right?
But I think we're getting there.
And, I have to say, like, we're at a time where journalism is really under siege, the sorts of powerful strong arming that we're talking about here and bribery, the give and the take, is really strongly in effect, right? It's not just a third of Washington Post gets laid off and the op-ed page are the biggest kiss asses for Trump that you can fucking imagine. It's both, right? It's that sycophancy of guys like Jake Lingle and it's suppressing honest journalists.
Right. And I would say the amount, at least current day, of honest journalists, though they perhaps get less attention, there's far more of them.
Yeah, I think that is a positive thing compared to this, where everyone made up everything, it feels like, back in the day. Hopefully that's not true now, And we are experiencing, I think, things like the Lingle killing, the ICE killings, obviously, in Minneapolis. I think the Jeffrey Epstein story, we can look to Great Britain as a place where journalism actually is breaking through over there and leading to accountability. The Prime Minister might lose his job there over the Epstein scandal, So it gives me some hope, I hope. But we are going to see even Al Capone every dog has his day, and even Al Capone is headed towards his.
Can't wait to see how this all gets tied in a bow.
It involves tax evasion.
It always does, doesn't it?